The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal fields of New Kepler. HFY stood at the observation deck of the mining station, watching his people work in the valley below. The Zilani moved with grace between the towering crystal formations, their pale blue skin shimmering in the light. Their hands glowed softly as they harvested the precious minerals that kept their small colony alive. 3 years had passed since the Zilani fled their homeworld. 3 years since the war machines had torn their planet apart. HFY still remembered the screams, the burning cities, the children crying for parents who would never come home. But here on New Kepler, they had found peace. They had found hope. Jake Morrison walked up beside him, carrying 2 cups of coffee. The human administrator was young, maybe 30 years old, with kind eyes and steady hands. He had helped the Zilani build their new home from nothing but bare rock and determination. "Another good harvest today," Jake said, handing HFY one of the cups. "We should have enough credits to buy those new water purifiers by next month." HFY nodded, his long fingers wrapping around the warm cup. The Zilani did not need coffee to survive, but they had learned to enjoy the ritual of sharing it with their human friends. It was one of many small things that made them feel less alone in the vast emptiness of space. "Your people have been very kind to us," HFY said in his soft voice. "We will not forget this kindness." Jake smiled. That's what neighbors do. They help each other. The peaceful moment was broken by the sharp beep of the communication system. Jake's assistant, a young woman named Carol, appeared on the screen. Her face was pale with worry. "Jake, you need to come to the communications center right now," she said. "We're picking up something on the long-range sensors. Something big." Jake and HFY hurried through the corridors of the mining station. The Zilani they passed seemed to sense the tension. Their empathic abilities allowed them to feel the emotions of others, and fear was spreading to the colony like wildfire. The communications center was crowded with technicians staring at their screens. Carol met them at the door, her hand shaking as she held out a data pad. "They appeared 2 hours ago at the edge of the system," she said. 47 ships. They're moving slowly, but they're heading straight for us." Jake took the pad and studied the sensor readings. His face went white. HFY looked over his shoulder and felt his heart skip a beat. The ships were massive, dark, and covered in weapon ports. Even from the grainy sensor images, they could see the skull-like decorations on the hulls. "Vorth," HFY whispered. The word fell from his lips like a curse. The Vorth were a nightmare that haunted every peaceful species in the galaxy. They were raiders, slavers, and killers who swept through space like a plague. They took what they wanted and destroyed everything else. Entire worlds have been emptied by their hunger for conquest. "How long do we have?" Jake asked. 72 hours, Carol said. "Maybe less if they speed up." Jake immediately activated the emergency broadcast system. Within minutes, distress signals were racing across the galaxy on every possible frequency. The message was simple and desperate. New Kepler was under attack. 50,000 innocent people needed help. Anyone who could hear the signal was begged to come. The response was swift and crushing. The Alterian High Command received the message and filed it under non-priority incidents. The Zenthran Empire acknowledged the signal and marked it as outside area of influence. The Galactic Council recorded the plea and scheduled it for discussion at their next meeting in 6 months. One by one, every major power in the galaxy found reasons to ignore the desperate call for help. Budget concerns, political complications, treaty obligations. The excuses poured in faster than the Vorth fleet was approaching. "Why won't they help us?" asked Carol, tears streaming down her face. HFY closed his eyes and reached out with his empathic senses. Across the galaxy, he could feel the cold indifference of civilizations that had grown tired of caring. They had heard too many distress calls, seen too many refugee crises, fought too many wars. The galaxy had grown numb to suffering. But then, like a warm light in the darkness, HFY felt something different. Far away, in a system 3 jumps from New Kepler, someone was listening. Someone cared. Captain Lisa Hayes sat in the command chair of the U.S. Defiant, a human heavy cruiser on routine patrol. She had been reviewing supply reports when the distress signal came through. Now she stared at the tactical display, showing the approaching Vorth fleet. "Ma'am," said her communications officer, "we're getting confirmations from all across the galaxy. Nobody's coming to help them." Lisa studied the numbers. 47 Vorth warships against a defenseless mining colony. It was not a battle. It would be a massacre. "Set course for New Kepler," she said quietly. "Captain, we only have 8 ships in range," her tactical officer warned. "The Vorth have 47. This is suicide." Lisa Hayes looked at the desperate faces of the Zilani in the distress signal. She thought about the children who would die if no one came. She thought about the kind of galaxy they would all be living in if decent people stopped standing up for what was right. "Maybe it is suicide," she said, "but some things are worth dying for. Signal the fleet. We're going to answer their call." Admiral Kate Sullivan sat behind her desk at Earth Command, staring at the report that had just arrived from the new Kepler system. The numbers were brutal. 47 Vorth warships, including 3 massive dreadnoughts, were closing in on a defenseless colony of refugees. The galaxy had turned its back on them. Her aide, Commander Paul Grant, stood at attention beside her desk. His face was grim as he waited for her decision. "How many ships can we get there in time?" Kate asked. 8, ma'am. The Defiant is already en route with Captain Hayes. We can send the Liberty, Ranger, Wolverine, and 4 destroyers. That's all we have in range. Kate rubbed her temples. 8 ships against 47. It was not just a long shot. It was impossible. Any military academy would call it madness. The Galactic Council sent another message. Paul continued. "They're warning us not to interfere. They say the Kepler system falls under some old treaty. The Kepler Accords or something." Kate laughed, but there was no humor in it. The Kepler Accords. A piece of paper written by politicians who never had to watch innocent people die. She stood up and walked a window overlooking Earth's orbital shipyards. "Paul, send a message back to Council. Tell them they can take their Accords and burn them. We don't abandon the innocent." Paul smiled despite the serious situation. "Yes, ma'am. I'll send that exact message." Within an hour, the human fleet was preparing for what everyone knew might be their final mission. The U.S. Liberty was the first to finish loading supplies. Commander Ryan Foster walked through his ship, checking on his crew. They were young, most of them. Farm boys from Iowa, factory workers from Detroit, college students who had joined the Space Navy looking for adventure. Now they were volunteering to die for people they had never met. "Sir," said his weapons officer, a young woman named Lisa Park, "why are we doing this? I mean, why risk everything for aliens?" Ryan stopped and looked at her. "Lisa, what's the point of having all these ships and weapons if we don't use them to protect people who can't protect themselves? What's the point of calling ourselves civilized if we let monsters murder children?" Lisa nodded slowly. "I understand, sir." On the U.S. Wolverine, Marine Colonel Jack Turner was addressing his troops. 200 Marines in full combat. Gear stood at attention in the cargo bay. They knew they were probably to die, but not one of them had asked to be transferred to a safer assignment. "Listen up," Jack said, his voice carrying easily through the bay. "We're going up against the Vorth. They're bigger than us, meaner than us, and there's a lot more of them. But they don't have what we have. They don't fight for anything except greed and cruelty. We fight for something better." A young Marine, barely 19 years old, raised his hand. "Colonel, what if we can't win?" Jack looked at the boy. "Son, winning isn't just about who's left standing at the end. Sometimes winning means showing the galaxy what real courage looks like. Sometimes winning means proving that decent people still exist." In the engineering section of the fleet, Chief Engineer Amy Clark was working 18-hour days to upgrade the ship's weapon systems. She had been experimenting with new plasma cannon designs, but they had never been tested in real combat. "Amy, you need to get some sleep," said her assistant, Tom Bradley. "You've been awake for 2 days straight." "No time," Amy muttered, her hands flying over control panels. "These cannons might be the only thing that can punch through Vorth armor. If I mess this up, people die." The fleet's xenobiologist, Dr. Nathan Pierce, was studying everything known about Vorth biology and tactics. His office was covered with charts, diagrams, and alien text translations. He had discovered something interesting about Vorth command structure. They use pheromones, he explained to Admiral Sullivan over the communication link. Their entire military hierarchy depends on chemical signals. If we could disrupt that somehow, what would we need? Kate asked. Chemical weapons, specifically designed to interfere with their sense of smell. It's never been tried before, but it might work. Kate nodded. Do it. Give our people every advantage we can. As the human fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, news of their mission spread across Earth. The planet was divided. Some people called the mission heroic. Others called it stupid. Politicians demanded explanations. Military experts predicted disaster. But in the small towns and big cities of Earth, ordinary people watched the news and felt something they had not felt in years. Pride. Their sons and daughters were risking everything to save strangers. Their military was doing something that mattered. Captain Hayes received the final go-ahead from Earth Command as her fleet gathered at the jump point. 8 small human ships against the most feared raiders in the galaxy. All ships, this is defiant, she broadcast. Today we're not just fighting for the Zilani. We're fighting for the idea that some things are more important than politics or treaties or playing it safe. We're fighting for the belief that when someone calls for help, you answer. The human fleet jumped to hyperspace, carried within the hopes of 50,000 refugees, and the determination to prove that humanity would never ignore a cry for help. In the Galactic Council chambers, alien diplomats watched the human fleet disappear into hyperspace and shook their heads. The humans were about to throw their lives away for nothing. It was tragic, but predictable. Humans had always been too emotional, too willing to take risks for strangers. They had no idea they were about to witness the birth of a new galaxy. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace just as the first Vorth ships began their attack on New Kepler. Captain Lisa Hayes watched her tactical screen with growing horror. The mining station's shields were flickering and failing under the massive alien warship's bombardment. Streams of Vorth landing craft were already racing toward the planet's surface. "Ma'am, we're being hailed by the Vorth flagship," reported her communications officer. "Put them through," Lisa said. The main screen filled with the image of a Vorth commander. The alien's reptilian face was covered in ritual scars, and his yellow eyes burned with cruel amusement. When he spoke, his voice was like gravel scraping against metal. "Human ships, I am War Leader Krex of the Vorth Empire. You are greatly outnumbered. Surrender now and we will kill you quickly. Resist and we will take you alive for the slave markets." Lisa stood up from her command chair. She had been afraid when she jumped into the system, but looking at this monster, she felt her fear turn into cold anger. "War Leader Krex, this is Captain Lisa Hayes of the United Earthship Defiant. Withdraw from the system immediately or face the consequences." Krex threw back his head and laughed. The sound was like breaking glass. 8 small ships against 47 of ours? You humans are even stupider than we thought. Prepare to die, little captain. The communication ended. Lisa turned to her tactical officer. "All ships, engage at will. Show them what humans can do." The battle began immediately. The Vorth ships were massive, dark gray monsters covered in weapon ports and armor plating. The human ships looked tiny by comparison, but they moved with speed and precision that the aliens had not expected. The UES Ranger fired first, its new plasma cannons cutting through space like blue lightning. Chief Engineer Amy Clark's experimental weapons worked better than anyone had hoped. The plasma bolts punched through a Vorth cruiser's shields and tore holes in its hull. But the Vorth returned fire with devastating effect. Their energy beams and missile volleys filled space with deadly light. The human ships twisted and rolled, trying to avoid the worst of the attack. But there were too many enemies shooting at them. Commander Ryan Foster of the UES Liberty watched his shields drop to 30%. His ship was taking a beating, but he had an idea. A crazy, impossible idea that might just work. "All hands, prepare for emergency evacuation," he announced over the ship's intercom. "This is going to get rough." His crew looked at each other with confusion, but they followed orders. Within minutes, escape pods were loaded and ready to launch. Ryan aimed his ship directly at the largest Vorth battleship and pushed the engines to maximum power. "Foster, what are you doing?" Captain Hayes demanded over the communication link. "Something that needs doing," Ryan replied. "Take care of my crew, Lisa." The Liberty accelerated toward the Vorth battleship like a missile. The aliens realized what was happening and turned all their weapons on a human ship, but it was too late. Ryan ejected the crew pods just before impact. The destroyer smashed through the battleship's shield generator and buried itself deep in the alien ship's hull. Both vessels exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire system. The blast was so powerful it damaged 2 other Vorth ships nearby. "Ryan!" Lisa screamed, but her friend was gone. On the planet's surface, Colonel Jack Turner's Marines had set up defensive positions around the Zolani evacuation sites. The alien refugees were loading onto transport ships as fast as they could, but the Vorth landing craft were getting closer. Jack's soldiers were wearing the new exoskeleton armor that Earth's engineers had designed. The powered suits made them stronger and faster, and the energy shields held up surprisingly well against Vorth weapons. "Here they come," shouted Sergeant Bob Miller as the first Vorth warriors appeared over a ridge. The aliens were huge, nearly 8 feet tall, with thick scales and razor-sharp claws. They carried energy rifles that could cut through solid rock. The Marines opened fire with their plasma rifles. The new weapons that Dr. Nathan Pierce had helped design were deadly effective. Vorth warriors that had survived hundreds of battles fell under the accurate human fire. But there were so many of them. For every alien they killed, 2 more appeared. Jack knew his Marines could not hold forever. "All units, fall back to evacuation point Beta," he ordered. "Keep those civilians moving." In space, the battle continued to rage. The human fleet had lost a Ranger and 2 destroyers, but they had destroyed 12 Vorth ships and damaged 6 more. More importantly, they were buying time for the evacuation. Dr. Pierce's biological warfare experiment was finally ready. Commander Beth Parker, the U.S. Wolverine, loaded the chemical weapons into her ship's missile tubes. The modified compounds were designed to disrupt Vorth pheromone communication. "Launching disruption missiles," Beth announced. The missiles exploded among the Vorth fleet, releasing clouds of invisible chemicals. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the aliens began making mistakes. Ships that had been moving in perfect formation suddenly collided with each other. Orders became confused. The disciplined Vorth fleet started falling apart. Captain Hayes saw the opening and pressed the attack. "All ships focus fire on the damaged battleship. We can break their line." The human ships concentrated their fire on a single target. The Vorth battleship's armor began to crack under combined assault. Explosions rippled along its hull as critical systems failed. But the victory was about to come at a terrible price. War leader Krex had targeted the Defiant with his flagship's main weapons. The massive energy beam struck Hayes' ship directly in the bridge. "Hull breach on deck 1," someone screamed over the intercom. "Bridge is gone." In the command center, Lisa Hayes lay pinned under a fallen beam. Her uniform was torn and bloody, but she was still alive. Around her, the bridge crew was dead or dying. Sparks flew from damaged control panels, and the air was filled with smoke. She activated her personal communicator with trembling fingers. Her voice was weak but determined as she gave her final order. "All ships," this is Hayes, "continue the evacuation. No matter what happens to us, save those people." That's an order. The communication went dead. Captain Lisa Hayes, who had answered the call when the galaxy turned away, died as she had lived, fighting for those who could not fight for themselves. But her sacrifice was not in vain. The human fleet, inspired by their captain's courage, fought harder than ever. On the planet below, the evacuation continued. 48,000 Zolani had been saved. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you pushed humans too far. The battle raged for 18 hours without stopping. Space around New Kepler was filled with burning wreckage from both human and Vorth ships. The remaining human fleet fought like cornered wolves, using every trick and desperate tactic they could think of. Commander Beth Parker now led the human forces from the U.S. Wolverine. With Captain Hayes dead and 2 other ships destroyed, she was a senior officer left alive. Her ship was badly damaged, with hull breaches on 3 decks and half her weapons offline. Status report. She called out to her bridge crew. We've lost a Ranger and 2 destroyers, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Sam Torres. The Liberty took out that battleship before she went down. We got 5 ships left, but they're all hurt bad. Beth looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had destroyed 12 war vessels and damaged 6 more, but the aliens still had 29 ships left. The odds were still impossible. On the planet below, Colonel Jack Turner was leading the final phase of the evacuation. His Marines had been fighting for 16 hours straight, falling back from position to position, as more Vorth warriors landed on the surface. "How many more civilians?" he asked Sergeant Bob Miller over the radio. "About 2,000, sir. The last transport ships are loading now." Jack checked his ammunition counter. He was down to his last few power cells. Around him, his Marines were in the same situation. They had been fighting against overwhelming odds for so long that their equipment was starting to fail. "Sir, we've got a problem," called out Corporal Lisa Stone from her position behind a destroyed vehicle. "Vorth heavy armor coming up the main road. 3 war machines, maybe more." Jack looked through his binoculars and cursed. The Vorth war machines were like walking tanks, 12 feet tall and covered in thick armor. Their weapons could level buildings. His Marines had nothing that could stop them. In space, Dr. Nathan Pierce's chemical warfare experiment was working better than anyone had hoped. The Vorth fleet was still making mistakes as their pheromone communication system remained disrupted. Ships crashed into each other, weapons fired at the wrong targets, and orders became confused. War leader Krex was furious. His perfectly disciplined fleet had turned into a mess of confused vessels. He could not understand what the humans had done, but he knew they were responsible. "All ships, target the human command vessel," he roared into his communicator. "Kill them all." The Vorth focused their fire on the Wolverine. Beth Parker felt her ship shake as energy beams and missiles struck the hull. Her shields were already gone, and the armor was beginning to crack. "Ma'am, we can't take much more of this," warned Chief Engineer Tom Bradley over the intercom. "The reactor's going critical. We need to abandon ship." Beth looked at the evacuation status on her screen. The last transport ships were still loading refugees on the planet's surface. If the human fleet ran now, those people would die. "Negative," she said firmly. "We hold the line until the evacuation is complete." On the planet, the Vorth war machines were getting closer. Jack could hear their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. His Marines were down to their last ammunition, and there was nowhere left to retreat. Then something unexpected happened. The Zolani refugees, who had been peacefully boarding the transport ships, began to fight back. Despite their pacifist nature, they could not watch their human protectors die alone. Kethvar appeared beside Jack, carrying a mining laser that had been converted into a weapon. Behind him came hundreds of other Zolani, all armed with whatever tools they could find. "We cannot let you fight alone," Kethvar said in his soft voice. "You came to save us. Now we fight beside you." The mining lasers were not military weapons, but they were powerful enough to cut through Vorth armor. The Zolani used their natural empathic abilities to coordinate their attacks, striking at the exact moments when the alien warriors were most vulnerable. The first Vorth war machine fell when 20 mining lasers hit it at the same time. The alien crew inside died as their vehicle exploded. The second war machine tried to retreat, but was surrounded by angry Zolani, who had finally found their courage. In space, the tide of battle was turning. The Vorth fleet, confused and leaderless, was making more and more mistakes. Commander Beth Parker ordered her remaining ships to press the attack. "All vessels, focus fire on their command ship," she transmitted. "Take out their leader." The human ships, battered and barely functional, concentrated their remaining firepower on War Leader Krex's flagship. The massive Vorth vessel tried to maneuver away, but Dr. Pierce's chemicals had affected its crew as well. The ship moved too slowly and took the full force of the human attack. Krex's flagship exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The war leader who had terrorized dozens of worlds died in the fires of his own ship, with their commander dead and their fleet in chaos. The remaining Vorth ships began to retreat. They had expected an easy victory against a few human vessels. Instead, they had found a fight they could not win. Beth Parker watched the alien ships disappear into hyperspace and felt a mixture of relief and sorrow. They had won, but the cost had been terrible. Captain Hayes was dead. Commander Foster was dead. Hundreds of Marines and sailors would never go home, but they had saved 48,000 innocent lives. The Zilani were free, and the Vorth had been defeated. The victory at New Kepler sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News of the battle spread through hyperspace communication networks faster than anyone could control it. The impossible had happened. A small human fleet had defeated the mighty Vorth Empire. In the Galactic Council chambers, alien diplomats watched the reports with growing alarm. They had expected the humans to die quietly, like so many other species that had tried to fight the Vorth. Instead, humanity had won a victory that would change everything. The galaxy was about to learn that there were consequences for abandoning the innocent, and those consequences had a name: humanity. The news of humanity's victory at New Kepler spread across the galaxy like wildfire. In council chambers, military headquarters, and diplomatic offices on 1,000 worlds, alien leaders watched the battle reports with shock and disbelief. The humans had done the impossible. They had defeated the Vorth Empire with only 8 ships. But not everyone was celebrating. Ambassador Helen Brooks stood in the center of the Galactic Council chamber, surrounded by hundreds of alien delegates. The Great Hall was filled with angry voices and accusing stares. She had been summoned to answer for humanity's crimes at New Kepler. The council speaker, a tall alien with gray skin and 6 arms, called for silence. His voice echoed through the chamber as he read the charges against Earth. The humans stand accused of unauthorized military intervention, violation of the Kepler Accords, and destabilization of galactic peace, he announced. How does Earth respond to these charges? Helen looked around the chamber at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. Most of them looked angry or disgusted. A few seemed frightened. She had expected this reaction, but it still hurt to see it. The Earth responds that we saved 50,000 innocent lives, she said clearly. We responded to a distress call that everyone else ignored. We did what was right. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. Delegates jumped to their feet, waving their arms and tentacles in outrage. The speaker pounded his gavel repeatedly, trying to restore order. The humans have no right to interfere in galactic affairs, shouted the Altrian ambassador. They are a young species with no understanding of the delicate balance we maintain. They destroyed dozens of ships and killed thousands of Vorth warriors, added the Zentran delegate. This act of aggression cannot be allowed to stand. Helen felt her anger rising. These beings had sat in their comfortable chambers while children were about to die, and now they wanted to punish humanity for doing something about it. Where were you when distress call came? She demanded. Where was your delicate balance when the Vorth were preparing to slaughter refugees? You all received the same message we did, and you all chose to do nothing. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the speaker spoke again, his voice cold and formal. The Council finds Earth guilty of all charges. Humanity will face economic sanctions and military restrictions. Your ships will be banned from Council space. But even as the Council passed their judgment, something else was happening across the galaxy. The real consequences of New Kepler were not what the politicians expected. On the world of Mentera, Prime Minister Vel Tarn watched the Council proceedings with growing disgust. The Mentari were a proud species that valued honor above politics. They had been ashamed of their government's failure to help the Zilani, and now they were inspired by humanity's courage. Send a message to Earth. Vel Tarn ordered his aide. Tell them the Mentari Republic officially thanks humanity for demonstrating true honor. Tell them we would be proud to call them allies. Similar scenes were playing out on dozens of worlds. The Krell Confederacy, a military alliance of warrior species, publicly offered to share weapons technology with Earth. The small nations of the Outer Rim, who had always lived in fear of stronger powers, began looking toward humanity with hope. Dr. Nathan Pierce, now back on Earth, was analyzing reports from across the galaxy. His office was filled with communication intercepts, news broadcasts, and diplomatic messages. What he was seeing amazed him. "Admiral Sullivan, you need to see this," he said, calling a superior on the communication link. "We've triggered something huge. The galaxy is splitting into two camps." Kate Sullivan appeared on the screen, looking tired but interested. "Explain." "The established powers, the council members, they're all condemning us. But the smaller species, the ones who usually get ignored, they're supporting us. We've accidentally started a revolution." On the Vorth homeworld, Supreme War Leader Gorthrex received the news of defeat at New Kepler with cold fury. No one had humiliated the Vorth Empire in over 2 centuries. The humans had destroyed his finest war leader and scattered his fleet like frightened animals. "Prepare the Grand Armada," he ordered his generals. "We will show these humans what happens when they interfere with the Vorth Empire. We will burn their homeworld to ashes." His generals exchanged worried glances. The Grand Armada had not been assembled in 50 years. It would mean pulling ships from every corner of Vorth space, leaving their conquered world defenseless. "Supreme Leader," one of them dared to speak, "this will require every ship we have. Our empire will be vulnerable." Gorthrex turned his yellow eyes on the general. "The humans have made this personal. They have made it about honor. We cannot let this insult stand, no matter the cost." Meanwhile, on Earth, Admiral Kate Sullivan was dealing with a different kind of pressure. Politicians and military leaders were demanding explanations. Some wanted to apologize to the Galactic Council and try to restore diplomatic relations. Senator Robert Hayes, no relation to the deceased captain, was particularly vocal in his criticism. "This whole incident is a disaster," he argued in an emergency session of the Senate. "We've made enemies of every major power in the galaxy. We need to apologize and make this right." Kate stood before the Senate committee, her uniform crisp and her expression determined. "Senator, with respect, we have nothing to apologize for. We saved innocent lives when no one else would. If that makes us enemies of the Council, then maybe we need better friends. But the economic sanctions, the military restrictions," another senator protested. "Earth cannot survive isolated from the galactic community." "We won't be isolated," Kate replied. "The Mentari Republic has already offered alliance. The Krell want to share technology. Dozens of smaller species are reaching out to us. We may have lost the Council, but we've gained something more important. We've gained the respect of beings who understand what honor means." In his quarters aboard the orbital station, Kethvar was composing a message to the leaders of his people scattered across the galaxy. The Zilani had always been pacifists, but New Kepler had changed them. They had seen what real courage looked like, and they want to be part of it. "My fellow Zilani," he wrote, "for too long we believed that peace means avoiding conflict at any cost. But the humans have shown us that sometimes peace must be defended. Sometimes good people must stand and fight, or evil will triumph by default." The message would reach every Zilani colony within days. Soon, the galaxy's most peaceful species would be offering their support to Earth, bringing with them their advanced technology and their natural empathic abilities. The Galactic Council had intended to punish humanity for their actions at New Kepler. Instead, they had created something far more dangerous to their established order. They had made humanity a symbol of hope for every species that had ever been ignored, oppressed, or abandoned. The galaxy was about to learn that there were consequences for choosing politics over principle. And those consequences were coming whether they were ready or not. 3 months after the battle at New Kepler, long-range sensors at Earth's outer defense stations detected something that made every military officer's blood run cold. A massive fleet was approaching the Sol system. 215 Vorth warships, including 12 dreadnoughts and the largest space fortress anyone had ever seen. Admiral Greg Murphy stood in the command center of Earth Defense Headquarters, watching the tactical display with grim determination. He had taken over from Kate Sullivan, who was now coordinating the defense of the entire system from the orbital command station. "Time to arrival?" Greg asked his aide, Commander Sarah Kim. 48 hours at their current speed," Sarah replied. "Sir, it's the entire Vorth Grand Armada. They've pulled ships from every corner of their empire." Greg nodded grimly. The humans had known this was coming. Intelligence reports had been tracking Vorth fleet movements for weeks. Supreme War Leader Gorthrex had made his intentions clear and broadcast across the galaxy. Earth would burn for the humiliation at New Kepler. But humanity was not the same species that had fought with 8 ships 3 months ago. The victory at New Kepler had changed everything, including Earth's military capabilities. Chief Engineer Amy Clark had spent every waking hour since the battle upgrading Earth's defenses. The sole defense grid now included 300 plasma satellites, each armed with the improved weapons that had proven so effective against Vorth armor. Gravity mines floated in carefully planned patterns around the system, invisible death traps that could tear apart even the largest ships. Amy, status report on the new weapons. Greg called to the chief engineer over the communication link. All systems are green. Amy replied from her position in the Orbital Weapons Control Center. The plasma satellites are twice as powerful as what we use at New Kepler. The gravity mines are completely invisible to their sensors. And we got some new surprises they won't be expecting. Dr. Nathan Pierce had also been busy. His research into Vorth biology had led to the development of new chemical weapons. But more importantly, he had been studying their military psychology. He thought he knew how to break their morale. The key is their command structure, he explained to Admiral Sullivan during a briefing. The Vorth respect only strength. If we can kill their supreme leader in front of his entire fleet, the rest might surrender rather than fight. But the most important change was that humanity was no longer alone. In the 3 months since New Kepler, dozens of species had offered support to Earth. Some provided technology, others sent ships, and a few offered something even more valuable: intelligence about Vorth tactics and weaknesses. The first Allied ships arrived 2 days before the Vorth fleet was due to reach Earth. The Mentari Republic sent their newest battlecruiser, the Bright Honor, along with 5 escort vessels. The ship's captain, a veteran warrior named Temvar, had specifically requested to fight alongside the humans. It is an honor to stand with Earth. Temvar transmitted as his ships took position in the defense fleet. Your courage at New Kepler has inspired warriors across the galaxy. The Krell Confederacy arrived next, bringing 20 ships filled with their finest warriors. The Krell were a proud military culture that valued battle above everything else. Their leader, War Chief Drachmol, was eager to test his weapons against the feared Vorth Empire. Even the peaceful Zilani contributed to Earth's defense. Kethvar arrived with 10 ships carrying advanced sensor equipment and communication gear. The Zilani could not fight, but their empathic abilities would allow them to predict Vorth movements and coordinate the defense fleet with perfect precision. We cannot use weapons, Kethvar explained to Admiral Sullivan, but we can see into the hearts of our enemies. We will know their intentions before they act. The most surprising support came from individual ships and crews from supposedly neutral worlds. Captains who claimed to be taking shore leave near Earth arrived with their vessels fully armed and ready for battle. Pilots who had resigned from their planetary defense forces showed up looking for work. Even some Galactic Council species sent unofficial help, despite their government's condemnation of humanity. Captain Sam Torres, who had survived the destruction of the Ranger at New Kepler, now commanded the new UES Retribution. He watched the growing defense fleet with amazement. "I never thought I'd see anything like this," he told his tactical officer, Lieutenant Mike Chun. 50 different species, all here to fight for Earth, all because we answered one distress call. The Galactic Council watched the buildup around Earth with growing alarm. They had expected the Vorth to destroy humanity quietly, solving their problem for them. Instead, they were seeing the formation of the largest military alliance in galactic history. "This is getting out of hand," complained the Altrian ambassador during an emergency session. "If the humans survive this attack, they'll become a major power. Our authority will be meaningless." "Perhaps we should warn them about the Vorth fleet movements," suggested a junior delegate. The chamber erupted in angry shouts. The idea of helping humanity was unthinkable to most council members. They had made their choice at New Kepler, and they were committed to it. As the Vorth Grand Armada approached the edge of the Sol system, Admiral Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Orbital Command Station, looking out at the largest defense fleet ever assembled. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels in perfect coordination. Species that have been enemies for centuries now fought as allies. "Ma'am, incoming transmission from the Vorth flagship," reported the communications officer. The main screen filled with the image of Supreme War Leader Gorthrex. The massive Vorth was even more frightening than his subordinates, covered in battle scars and ritual markings that spoke of countless victories. "Humans of Earth," he growled, his voice carrying the promise of death. "You humiliated my empire at New Kepler. You killed my finest war leader and scattered my fleet. For this insult, your world will burn and your species will serve as slaves until the end of time." Kate Sullivan stepped forward, her uniform crisp and her expression calm. "Supreme War Leader Gorthrex, I am Admiral Kate Sullivan of Earth Defense Command. You are not welcome in this system. Leave now, and no harm will come to your fleet." Gorthrex laughed, a sound like breaking bones. "Your small fleet cannot stand against the might of the Vorth Empire. We have come with 200 ships to crush 8. The mathematics of your destruction are simple." Kate smiled coldly. "You're right about the mathematics being simple, but I think you miscounted. The defense fleet powered up their weapons and revealed themselves. Over 300 ships from 50 different species emerged from hiding spots throughout the system. The trap was set, and the Vorth had flown straight into it. The Battle of Sol was about to begin. The Battle of Sol began with the largest exchange of weapons fire in galactic history. 215 Vorth warships faced over 300 Allied vessels in a massive sphere of combat that stretched across the entire solar system. Supreme War Leader Gorthrex had expected to fight 8 human ships. Instead, he found himself facing the combined fleets of 50 different species. His massive dreadnoughts, which had conquered entire star systems, were surrounded by enemies on all sides. "All ships, attack Formation 7, Gorthrex commanded. "Show these insects the power of the Vorth Empire." But the Allied fleet was ready. Chief Engineer Amy Clark's gravity mines activated as the Vorth ships moved into position. The invisible weapons tore through space, catching 3 Vorth cruisers and ripping them apart. The aliens had never encountered this technology before. Captain Sam Torres of the U.S. Retribution led the human attack wing straight at the Vorth flagship. His ship was one of the newer vessels, built with lessons learned from New Kepler. The plasma cannons were more powerful, the armor was thicker, and the crew was hungry for revenge. "This is for Captain Hayes," Sam said as he opened fire on the massive Vorth command ship. The Mentari battlecruiser Bright Honor fought alongside the human ships with deadly precision. Captain Temvar had studied human tactics and combined them with his own species' natural speed. His ship danced between the Vorth weapons like a deadly ballet. War Chief Drakmol of the Krell Confederacy laughed with joy as his warriors engaged the enemy. The Krell had been waiting for a chance to test themselves against the mighty Vorth, and they were not disappointed. Their heavy warships traded blow for blow with the alien dreadnoughts. But the most important contribution came from the Zilani. Kethvar and his people used their empathic abilities to coordinate the entire Allied fleet. They could sense the Vorth commander's intentions and warn their allies before attacks came. Vorth battleship moving to flank position, Kethvar transmitted to Admiral Sullivan. They planned to target the human medical ships. Kate immediately redirected 3 Krell vessels to intercept. The Vorth attack was stopped before it could begin. This happened again and again throughout the battle. The aliens found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move. As the battle raged, Dr. Nathan Pierce watched from the command center, studying the Vorth fleet's behavior. He was looking for the moment when his psychological warfare plan could be put into action. "Admiral, I think it's time," he said to Kate Sullivan. "Their morale is starting to crack. If we can eliminate their supreme leader now, the rest of the fleet might surrender." Kate nodded and opened a channel to Captain Torres. "Sam, I need you to do something crazy. We need to take out their flagship." Sam looked at the massive Vorth command ship on his tactical display. It was 3 times the size of his vessel and surrounded by escort ships. "Ma'am, that's suicide." "Maybe," Kate replied, "but it might end this war. Are you willing to try?" Sam thought about Captain Hayes, who had died saving the Zilani. He thought about Commander Foster, who had sacrificed himself at New Kepler. He thought about all the innocent people who would die if this war continued. "Yes, ma'am, I'm willing." The U.S. Retribution broke away from the main battle and accelerated toward the Vorth flagship. Sam's crew knew what he was planning, and not one of them asked to be transferred to safety. They had volunteered for this mission, just like their predecessors at New Kepler. The Vorth noticed a lone human ship approaching and turned all their weapons on it. Energy beams and missiles filled space around the Retribution, but Sam's pilot was skilled and the ship was fast. They weaved through the deadly fire, getting closer and closer to their target. "Sir, we're not going to make it," warned his tactical officer. Too much incoming fire. Then something unexpected happened. Ships from across the Allied fleet began moving to support the Retribution. Mentari vessels provided covering fire. Krell warships drew enemy attention. Even the peaceful Zilani used their advanced sensors to guide Sam through the defensive grid. The entire Allied fleet was sacrificing themselves to give one human ship a chance at victory. The Retribution broke through the Vorth defenses and rammed directly into Flagship's command center. The explosion was visible from Earth itself, a brilliant star that lit up the solar system. Supreme War Leader Gorthrex died in the fires of his own ship, along with the command staff that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. The effect on the Vorth fleet was immediate and devastating. Without their supreme leader, the rigid command structure collapsed. Ship captains who had followed orders without question suddenly found themselves alone and afraid. "This is Admiral Sullivan to all Vorth vessels. Kate broadcasts on all frequencies. Your leader is dead. Your empire is broken. Surrender now and you will be treated with honor. Continue fighting and you will share his fate." One by one, the Vorth ships powered down their weapons. The mighty empire that had conquered dozens of worlds surrendered to a coalition of species they had dismissed as weak. The Battle of Sol was over, but its effects would be felt across the galaxy for generations. In the weeks that followed, the political landscape of known space changed completely. The Galactic Council found itself increasingly irrelevant as new alliances formed around the principles that humanity had demonstrated at New Kepler. The Free Species Coalition held its first meeting on Earth 6 months after the battle. 37 different worlds sent representatives to discuss a new kind of galactic government based on mutual protection and shared values. Ambassador Helen Brooks, who had once faced condemnation in the council chambers, now addressed the representatives of free species from around the galaxy. "We gather here not as conquerors or rulers," she said, "but as beings who believe that civilization means protecting the innocent. We have learned that when someone calls for help, the answer should always be the same: we will come." The old galaxy, where the strong ignored the weak and politics mattered more than principles, was dying. In its place, something new was being born. A galaxy where courage was valued more than convenience, and where the cry for help would never again go unanswered. The Vorth still controlled some territory, but they no longer terrorized defenseless colonies. New patrol fleets, made up of ships from dozens of species, ensured that raiders and slavers faced immediate response. On New Kepler, the Zilani had built a monument to the humans who died saving their colony. The inscription was simple but powerful. They heard our call when no one else would listen. They came when no one else would act. They proved that heroes still exist among the stars. Kethvar often stood before the monument, remembering the day as people learned what courage looked like. The galaxy had ignored their SOS, but humans had answered with fire, and that fire had lit up the entire universe. The Age of Heroes had begun.